Thanks, Mr. Siddiqui, and thanks to the government team for organizing this press conference, and thank you all for being here today. Last night, U.S. forces in Afghanistan conducted a strike against an ISIS-K complex in Achin District, Nangarhar Province, Afghanistan. This strike is part of our campaign to destroy ISIS-K in Afghanistan in 2017. So far, these operations have liberated over 400 square kilometers in southern Nangarhar. The munition we used last night, the GBU-43, is designed to destroy caves and tunnels which ISIS-K have been using, along with extensive belts of IEDs, to thicken their positions against our offensive. This was the right weapon against the right target. I want to assure the people of Afghanistan that our forces take every possible precaution to prevent civilian casualty. We had persistent surveillance over the area before, during, and after the operation, and now we have Afghan and U.S. forces on the site and see no evidence of civilian casualties, nor have there been any reports of civilian casualties. Since they arrived in southern Nangarhar, ISIS-K has dragged elders out of their homes and beheaded them in front of their families. They rounded up other elders, forced them to kneel on explosives, and blew them up in front of their people.
He said that exactly we don't know that where are the IDs, but as we know, the Taliban told our villagers that there are some IDs in this building.
ISIS-K has murdered male family members, kidnapped their wives and daughters, and forced them to marry their fighters. Daesh has sent suicide bombers to attack peaceful demonstrations and have killed and wounded hundreds of innocent civilians. They have sent suicide bombers into mosques and murdered people during their prayer. And just last month, they shot and stabbed hospital patients lying in their beds. They are animals. The Afghan army, and specifically their commandos, are leading this fight against these barbaric terrorists. They are doing it on behalf of the people of Afghanistan, and indeed, they're doing it on behalf of all of us. The United States is committed to Afghanistan. We are united with the Afghan government to prevent terrorists from establishing safe havens in Afghanistan.
Coming up! You got enough guys. Dropping in. All right, good to go. Hey, see that compound right there? 4 meters that way. Right there. Go!
We will continue to work shoulder to shoulder with our Afghan comrades to eliminate this threat to the Afghan people, especially the people of Nangarhar, to the people of the entire region, and indeed, the people around the world. The enemy had created bunkers, tunnels, and extensive minefields, and this weapon was used to reduce those obstacles so that we could continue our offensive into southern Nangarhar. This weapon was used against ISIS-K in their sanctuary inside Afghanistan. And the purpose of this weapon and the purpose of this operation are to eliminate their sanctuary inside southern Nangarhar. And this weapon was very effective in that use. And our soldiers on the ground, our Afghan commandos, our special forces are on the site now, and the weapon achieved its intended purpose. So they will resume their offensive operations. Indeed, they already are, and they'll continue to press south into these ISIS sanctuaries. And this entire offensive, not just the use of a single weapon, demonstrates the commitment of the Afghan army, the Afghan special forces, and their U.S. partners to defeat Daesh in Afghanistan this year.
Two brief questions. You said the right munition for the right target. The question is more about the timing. The estimates that you had for ISK fighters last year, 2,000 to 3,000, that's been reduced. The territory has shrunk. Why such an unprecedented use of force now? Is there any push from the new administration in Washington, or was it more a calculation on the ground? The second question is that despite the ISK territory shrinking and the fighters reducing, they've continued to carry out urban attacks. And some Western officials say that the networks they've used for those urban attacks might be shared with the Haqqani network. Is there any connection and coordination between ISK and the Haqqani network?
First, Mujib, with respect to the timing, it's when we encountered this target on the battlefield. As I mentioned, since early March, we've been conducting offensive operations into southern Nangarhar. However, this was the first time that we encountered an extensive obstacle to our progress that was constituted by the belts of IEDs, the presence of tunnels and caves, and therefore this was the appropriate weapon to use at this time to reduce that obstacle to enable us to continue with our offensive operation into southern Nangarhar. So that is all there is to the timing. It was the right time to use it tactically against the right target on the battlefield, and it's enabled us to resume our offensive operation to the south. With respect to cooperation, one of the things we are concerned about here in Afghanistan, and the reason we think that the entire world needs to be focused on Afghanistan, is the potential for convergence amongst the various terrorist groups in this area. We have seen evidence of 20 different designated terrorist organizations in Afghanistan and Pakistan, and from time to time we see the members cooperate between the different groups, and this is a grave concern to us.
Thank you.
First one, who asked for it? Afghan government or US official offer, or US officials offered that attack for Afghan government? Other question, the timing of this attack. Just the day before the conference in Russia, the peace conference, the US refused to participate, and Russian is the only country who were, or one of the countries that more concerned about ISIL present in Afghanistan. So do you think it was a message to them, or can they do anything to help, at least in Afghanistan, US forces to fight against ISIL?
On the timing of this operation, again, we have been conducting operations against Islamic State in Afghanistan for the past year. As you know, at the beginning of these operations, Daesh had its presence in 11 districts in southern Nangarhar, and they had thousands of fighters. Over the last year, we have maintained steady pressure along with the Afghan commandos, the Afghan Army, the 201st Corps, against these enclaves, and have reduced them to a smaller area inside Afghanistan, roughly by 2/3. So these operations have been going on for the last year. This is not something that we began this week. Okay. Beginning in early March, we began another concerted offensive operation against Daesh in southern Nangarhar to reduce their presence in the remaining valleys and districts where they are. And so again, the timing of the use of this weapon was simply the appropriate tactical moment against the proper target to use this particular munition. So it is not related to any outside events other than our focus on destroying Daesh in 2017.
Thank you.
Well, as I have said before, I believe that all of the neighbors of Afghanistan need to acknowledge that the Afghan government, the Afghan security forces are the ones that are fighting Daesh, and that they should support the government and support the security forces in this courageous fight that they're conducting. And in fact, by conducting this fight so effectively, the Afghan security forces and the Afghan government are working on behalf of the entire region. They are in fact protecting the neighbors. They are protecting other nations who are concerned about Daesh. There will be no sanctuary for Daesh in Afghanistan. With these operations being conducted by the Afghan Army, with us working in partnership, we will remove the sanctuary in Afghanistan so that fighters may not flow from Syria to Afghanistan. This is the objective of the operation, and the Afghan Army has been extremely effective in this. So if this is recognized by the neighbors and recognized by the region, then this is a very positive thing.
Thank you.
Well, we are We are very focused with this operation on Daesh, but we also support the Afghan government and the Afghan military in their fight against the Taliban. And we hope that the fighting will end and we will be able to begin a reconciliation process, or we'll be able to see and support a reconciliation process between the Afghan government and the Taliban. And the sooner this begins, the better. But in the meantime, we will continue to strongly support the Afghan government and the Afghan military in their fight against anyone who seeks to undermine the democratically elected government of Afghanistan, which stands up for the Constitution of Afghanistan. So we'll continue to strongly support the Afghan military, the Afghan government, and their fight against anyone who opposes them. Well, last summer at the Warsaw Summit, the NATO Warsaw Summit in July of 2016, the international community had committed to 4 more years of financial support to the Afghan security forces and political support to the Afghan government. In October, the international donor community committed another $15 billion to the development needs of Afghanistan. So these two events taken together demonstrate the commitment of the international community to the government and the security forces of Afghanistan. And I expect in May of this year, when the heads of state meet again, we may hear about more a continuation of this support to Afghanistan. This operation is conducted on those enemy that are inside the borders of Afghanistan. So Daesh, as we know, is constituted of fighters who were originally members of the TTP, who came from the Orakzai Agency of Pakistan. They also have membership from the Islamic Movement of Uzbekistan, and some local Taliban have joined ISIS-K. So these primarily are who were fighting inside Afghanistan. We obviously remain very concerned about enemy sanctuary and support that they receive from outside of the country. However, this is not the focus of our military operations right now. We're very focused on those insurgents and terrorists who try to operate inside Afghanistan, and then we work with our diplomatic colleagues to work with our neighbors and other nations in the region to reduce the external support and the external sanctuary enjoyed by these enemies.
Mr. Nicholson, it's reported that Mr. McMaster is coming to Kabul. Could you please tell us about the purpose of his visit and the exact date? Thank you.
I know that any discussions of U.S. policy, I think, are best handled by the U.S. government in Washington. We continue to have a dialogue. For me, both of my chains of command, my U.S. chain of command and my NATO chain of command, about the future of this mission. But I would emphasize right up front, the outcome of the Warsaw Summit demonstrates that we are with the Afghan security forces for the next 4 years at least, and in NATO's planning, this will be followed by what is called an enhanced enduring partnership. So the sense of the international community is that they will continue to support Afghanistan for years to come.
Was this weapon, did it require you to seek any special permission from either the Pentagon or the White House, or was this covered already under your current authorization? We also understand from officials in Washington that the device itself had been here in Afghanistan for some time. Was there anything prior to this point, authorization-wise, that prevented you from using it, or could you have used it any time in the past year and you just didn't have a use for it? And finally, do you foresee using this kind of weapon in the future as you push ahead with these operations?
Thanks, Josh. First, I'd say I appreciate and enjoy tremendous support from my chain of command of both the U.S. side and the NATO side. So I appreciate the strong support and the strong statements from the President of the United States and the entire chain of command regarding the operations here in Afghanistan. This weapon was the appropriate weapon to use against this target, and prior to this we didn't have such a target. I am fortunate in that my chain of command allows me the latitude to make assessments on the ground, to operate within my authorities. Of course, we communicate constantly up and down the chain of command about what we're doing here on the ground. And at the end of the day, though, I'm very fortunate in that my chain of command supports me through General Votel, the Secretary of Defense, the President of the United States, in conducting operations to accomplish our national policy here in Afghanistan. That depends on the tactical situation. Again, we employed this weapon for a specific tactical solution to a particular military problem. And that's what determines when and how we operate here on the battlefield.